We are a little bit late, but here we go. Welcome to a GoPowercat Live. Tim Fitzgerald, Cole Carmody, Ryan Wallace, your trio tonight as we discuss K-State's step chart that was released. Cole Carmody, that means football season is almost here.
That's always a plus. There's nothing I like to do more than talk football. I know you guys can agree with me on that.
I know. Wally, just give me your quick thoughts before we pop it up on the screen here. Give me your quick thoughts on the step chart.
We'll go into it on detail here in a bit, but overall, for the most part, I think for anybody that's been tuned in to us and kind of, I guess, reading between the lines is probably not the way to go, but just kind of listening closely to what coaches and players have to say, it was fairly chalky. It was more, as usual, it was more wanting to see who the 2s and 3s were going to be and if there'd be any ors, but again, Fitz, as we'll get into here in a minute, I thought it's a really healthy balance of upperclassmen to underclassmen as much as I can ever remember on a week 1 depth chart.
Yeah, I would agree. My concern going into this season, I just did a daily delivery about this, is the conversion from that pandemic bonus season roster in which, we've seen the impact in the offensive line and Daniel Green being back, to technically Will Howard, any true freshman that played, would have one next year if they want to use it. But for the most part, this is the last year of the major impacts, certainly for K-State. And I'm amazed at how many young guys are on the step chart. And that was really encouraging to me. I think there's 6 true freshmen on there. Now, maybe a couple of them are because of injuries. I know, right tackle certainly is a position that is because of injury, but it's really encouraging. I think they've done an incredible job of building up depth, of creating the kind of depth they need. And like Coach Clanderman said, he's got like 8 to 10 guys on the defensive side of the ball in the true freshman class that he feels like can play. And Cole, that's huge. That's incredible.
Yeah, I've seen some people talk about how maybe because there's true freshmen on the depth chart that it might be considered a rebuilding year. And I think when that just is more of a testament to the kind of freshmen that you brought in this class of 23 class. It's not a bad thing that you have true freshmen on the 2 deep, even on the 3, because that means you have guys that are able, really for the first time in a few years, to step in and play almost immediately. And I think that when you have that, again, Fitz, you mentioned it, the quality of depth is greater now with the younger players than it has been in the past. You still have the Daniel Greens and the Austin Moores, but now all of a sudden you get an Asa Newsome who might be able to step in and play any of those linebacker spots. I don't think it's necessarily a reflection of the not so good upperclassmen who aren't on the 2 deep. I think it's more of a reflection of the really good underclassmen.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's pop up that offensive depth chart right here. Not a great way to do it, but I've done it this way. As we look at this, I'm just going to start quarterback. Will Howard, of course. And then there's the or. I did not expect the or. And here's honestly what I'm hearing, folks, is Jake Rubley's the guy to go in the 4th quarter if, they're going to finish off a win. But at least going into the season, the hope was maybe to get a redshirt on Avery. But this or, Ryan Wallace, kind of tells me that maybe they said, screw it. We're hearing that Avery might be the best athlete on the team. He might be the fastest guy on the team, and he's a quarterback. And we're also being told he's throwing the ball all over the field with great accuracy, and they can't believe how much he's picked up since being the newbie in spring to now. Ryan Wallace, I imagine as someone who followed his recruitment so much, you're a little bit surprised, but not that surprised that he might be truly the number 2.
I started thinking kind of over the summer about this, actually. And again, this isn't like a toot my own horn kind of thing. This is just again kind of to emphasize how good I feel like, and people like myself that have seen Avery feel like he is. I can only remember like Avery Johnson and Jordan Willis as maybe the only 2 guys that I remember planting that flag early, Fitz, and saying, this guy can play probably sooner than later and have a great impact. Jordan, it took a little bit, right? I think it was
Right.
more sophomore, junior year before he really started to come into his own. But there aren't many guys that you watch. And so from that point of view, no, it's not a surprise. But I'm with you, Fitz. I think from the optics point of view, it was like, whoa. Because all along, I assumed kind of the Bill Snyder way of thinking. And I think a lot of K-State fans are still stuck in that way as we start to talk more about the depth chart, right? Is that you just kind of presume there's the public-facing depth chart and there's the locker room-facing depth chart. And therefore, to give Jake Rubley confidence, to give shed a little bit more light, I guess, on what it means to be a veteran in that system and everything, we're going to have Jake Rubley be the number 2 without an or. And week 1, they waste 0 time just saying, nah, to hell with that. And I like that about Chris Kleiman's staff, because if you're on the depth chart, there is no reading between the lines with them. As I said earlier, I think they're very straightforward. These are the guys. If you're here, this is where we think you are. If you're not, you need to get better. And if you're going to be disappointed about it, you either become more competitive or you can find someplace else. There's a transfer portal now. So I just thought it was really telling, Fitz, that they're giving Avery that kind of confidence, but also kind of in a way, and I don't know if they mean to do this or not, in a way it's kind of like, Jake, we believe in this guy that's behind you this much to put an or. So, we're going to continue to evaluate through the fall, but there's no point in us waiting until mid-season to then throw Avery Johnson on the depth chart. We think that much of him now, and we feel confident about the future of the program to put him on right now.
Cool.
That was pretty eye-opening to me. And Fitz, sending it back to you, as far as whether we think he'll play or not, I think us three have all kind of been in the camp of we think they're going to sprinkle him in. But again, you put him on the depth chart in week 1, I think this is becoming more of just sprinkling him in. I mean, he's going to max out at 4 and maybe beyond that. The question that I have then, Fitz, and this is getting off the depth chart a little bit, is it good to not redshirt Avery Johnson?
It's interesting. This is one of those situations where if he's as good as they think he is, don't even bother redshirting. I mean, do you really think if he's really this good as a freshman, you're going to see him as a senior? You're going to, have a 5th year? Probably not, is what they're thinking. So, Cole, let me put you on the spot. K-State's up, hypothetically speaking, 4 touchdowns over SEMO going into the 4th quarter or early 4th quarter. Who comes onto the field?
I think Avery Johnson. I'm at the point right now with this whole situation to where if he was truly the 3rd quarterback, as Colin Klein said last year when they were trying to redshirt Will Howard, if the helmet comes off, Jake Rubley's going in. I think if you were to ask Colin Klein that question on Thursday, if the helmet comes off, who's going into the game, he wouldn't have an answer for you. And because he wouldn't have an answer, that answer would be Avery Johnson. I'm truly at the point, and this is just strictly my opinion, but I've been watching the Swamp Kings on Netflix, and they have Chris Leak and they have Tim Tebow as a true freshman.
You took it out of my mouth, Cole.
Keep going. This just feels like something where they know that you mentioned it. If he's as good as they think he is, he's not going to be here for all 4 seasons. So you might as well put packages in, find a way to get him on the field. I mean, that was the biggest takeaway of the whole depth chart for me, was seeing that or. And maybe we're reading too much into it. Maybe we are. Maybe it's just a motivational tactic for Jake Rubley. But I don't see that. I really believe that Avery Johnson's going to have a role in this team.
This is Swamp Kings. This is literally Swamp Kings. I mean, to me, I think going into the season before today, we kind of assumed Jake Rubley's the number 2, and if there is a season-ending, a major, multi-game injury to Will Howard, then they might have a decision to linger about, right? I don't know if there's really a decision anymore. And Fitz, it goes back to what you were saying. If he's that good, Urban Meyer, well, we won't get into Urban Meyer, but the choice of that staff was Tim Tebow is too damn good and brings an element to this game and this offense that Chris Leak cannot, that it's not worth redshirting him. And I think maybe we're starting to see some signs of that with Avery Johnson and Will Howard.
If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you drop in any comments. over there. We can see them, and have any questions, throw them in there. We'll try to get to them. Cole, I'll answer the second half of the question since you answered Avery anyhow. I thought maybe Jake would come in that situation, but I think if something happens with Will Howard, I've always thought Avery'd be the guy that comes in. If it's just a helmet off or a knock knee for a few downs, maybe they do stick with Jake. I'm not sure. You got to keep him engaged. And if you immediately make it clear that or is a fallacy and it's really Avery, what happens to him? And I mean, is that in this day and age, you got to have three good ones. And with all respect to Adrian Lara, I think there's a gap here where he's just not quite as ready as the other ones. Oops. Let's go.
That's where maybe Jacob Knuth comes in. Yep. Maybe.
And we're hearing good things about him also. Okay, let's move on here. Let's look at the offensive line. And really no surprises here. There is an or at that right guard spot with Hadley Panzer and Taylor Portier. I'm interested to see what happens on Saturday, who actually goes on the field. And, of course, with Christian Duffy's injury, he will miss this game. Carver Willis moves in to that right side with Drake Beckwith, the freshman, backing him up. But Ryan Wallace, along that offensive line, I feel like if the right tackle doesn't get it done in this game, the backup's Cooper Beebe. I just feel like, maybe you move one of those right guards into left guard, or, they've got Andrew Linegang listed as the backup at two different spots. Maybe, they feel better about that. But I just feel like if things don't go right with Willis, Cooper, go take care of business, just like we've seen other great linemen do for K-State.
No, I mean, no doubt. I think you have to look at that right tackle position and keep in mind that you're looking at the number 2 is the number 1 and the number 3 is the number 2. And that's no disrespect to Drake Beckwith. We like Drake Beckwith a lot. I thought his camp when he came in to earn his scholarship offer was phenomenal. So I'm really excited to see him grow. But, he is the number 3. So if something were to go terribly wrong with Carver Willis, it's going to be Cooper Beebe until Christian Duffy returns. And then it goes back to what you said about Andrew Linegang. That, to me, as far as offensive line takeaways, that was the big one for me. I thought it was a little interesting that you still have the or with Panzer and Potier. But having seen what Taylor Potier can do when he's healthy, that shouldn't be that big of a surprise. But having Andrew Linegang listed at 2 different positions, to me, guys, was a choice. And we talked about kind of the message, whether it's intentional or not, it sends at the quarterback position to put Avery Johnson on there. I think it also may send a message of having Andrew Linegang at 2 different spots as the number 2. I think we all agree he is, other than if you want to consider Taylor Potier a 6-man, he's kind of a 5.5 to me. But Andrew Linegang is the 6th man of the offensive line. I think in a pinch he could play almost anywhere across the board, and they're that confident in him. But what is the message to a guy like John Pastore, who we heard a lot about last season as being the guy of the redshirt freshman? And now we go to week 1 and the choice is made to, instead of maybe list John Pastore at number 2 at left tackle, there's Andrew Linegang. And so on one hand, again, I think, guys, it signals just how good Andrew Linegang is and their want and need to get him on the field this year. But I also wonder, the nervous transfer portal era of me worries, does that send a message to John Pastore too?
I'd agree. Cole, your thoughts on this offensive line?
Well, I know that I have previewed every single position group over at GoPowercat.com for our VIP subscribers. And the offensive line, to me, is arguably the most interesting rotation of players on the field, simply because the backups are listed. But will those backups really go into the game? To me, the answer is no. I'm at a point with this offensive line, when you get Christian Duffy back, where essentially, if you want to count Andrew Linegang as rotational player, I believe you have 7 offensive linemen that will play. You have your 5 starters, and then you have either Hadley Panzer, Taylor Potier, whichever one doesn't play, and Andrew Linegang. Unless Carver Willis goes out and absolutely kills it, which he very well could. I mean, there is a very good chance that he performs well. We've heard great things of his progression. But you're at a point now where you have 7 guys that are going to play. So the 3 other guys that are listed as backups, or maybe that would go in at those spots, I just don't see them going in. And that's no disrespect to those guys, but that was what was always going to happen when you bring every single starter back from your offensive line and basically another starter who was out with a season-ending injury. So there's guys listed as backups, but I just can't see them going in.
Yeah.
Fitz, do you envy Connor Riley this year? Because I think on one hand, there's like his group is the most watched, most talked about group there is. But as we've been talking about all offseason, there's this juggling act that he has to perform this season. If anybody can do it, I think it's Riles. But man, what a tough spot to be in.
Well, KT Levinston Sr., Cooper Beebe Sr., Hayden Gillum Sr., Hadley Panzer Jr., but Taylor Poitier is a senior. Of course, the missing right tackle, Mr. Duffy, is a senior. You got to play some younger guys at some point. You got to get them out there. You're just setting yourself up for a train wreck early next season if you don't get some experience under these belts. It's just going to be a mess. Let's move on to another position here as we continue to look at the offense. Someone, Houston Cat, asked us about this. Ben Sinnott is listed as the fullback ahead of Christian Moore, and Will Swanson, Garrett Oakley, and Braden Lofton are the tight ends. Wally, you want to explain why Ben Sinnott, who really is the tight end, is listed as a fullback?
Well, to preview a piece that I think we will have coming out, I think tomorrow on GoPowercat, I'm the one that's bringing up the rear of the group here. But is it because they want Ben Sinnott to be an all-conference pick and fullback? Is that maybe, are they playing their hand at maybe getting in there? But in all seriousness, I think it goes to show, and I'll be curious to see if the depth chart changes week to week based on kind of the defensive opponent, or if this is the structure that we will always have, where it will always include a fullback all season long. And again, maybe that's just to show the versatility of Ben Sinnott, to give him maybe some more postseason accolades. But I wonder too, and this goes deeper as we get into the wide receivers as well, if this isn't an ode to maybe some more 12 and 22 personnel. In other words, having two, quote, tight ends on the field. And Ben Sinnott is obviously one of those guys that can do both. I think Will Swanson, we would all agree, is probably better as a run blocker than he is as a pass catcher. And I think Garrett Oakley at this point in his career is the opposite. Right. But I wonder too, just looking at, again, as we'll get into the receivers, looking at that position a little bit more, if maybe they don't feel a little bit better with what they have at the tight end position right now. And therefore, how can we work more guys onto the field, whether it's as a, quote, fullback or tight end? But I think we'll see. I'd be surprised, especially week one, knowing that they just want to, ground and pound as much as possible and, air it out when they want. But if we don't see more of that kind of 12 and 22 personnel, Cole.
Yeah, I was a little surprised when I saw Ben Sinnott listed as a fullback, simply because we heard in the offseason that K-State was done having fullbacks, that was a dead position. They're not recruiting fullbacks anymore. But to me, this just says Ben Sinnott is going to do a lot of different things for this Kansas State offense. He's going to line up at fullback. They might even hand him the ball in third and short, fourth and short. He's going to be split out. I mean, somebody asked him the question at one of the media availability, who does he compare himself to? And he answered Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle. If that doesn't describe his game perfectly, I don't know what does. He is a Kyle Juszczyk. He is a George Kittle. He's going to get down and dirty, and he's going to do a lot of things for this offense. So, yeah, and I think part of the two tight ends, as you mentioned, Wally, I think they want to have some competition with Will Swanson and Garrett Oakley. Those two guys are pretty neck and neck at this moment. So I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. But, yeah, Ben Sinnott's going to do a lot of things for this team, and so listing him as a fullback, I think that's just another ode to, hey, this guy can do it all.
He's going to line up at fullback a lot, but not start the play at fullback. He'll shift up to the tight end spot or wide. You're going to just do a lot of that, which is pretty common. Trey Molina, I see your question. I'll get to it here in just a second, but let's go back to this as we kind of finish this up. Wide receivers, Keegan Johnson, Xavier Lloyd at the one spot. As we get down to the other ones, of course, Phil Brooks is there. Shane Porter, very interesting. Not Seth Porter. Shane Porter is there. And Jace Brown also. RJ Garcia, Jaden Jackson at that other spot. No real surprises here, right? I mean, this is kind of what we expected.
What we expected, but at the same time, and again, it's week one, so you take it with a grain of salt, but, not maybe what you were hoping for from the, highly touted group of freshman receivers, right? The one freshman that gets listed as Jace Brown, who came in without a lot of recruiting hype and ends up being not only the best guy, it sounds like, through fall camp of the freshmen, but throughout the spring as well. I still don't think he'll see the field. I don't know if Shane Porter will see the field either. To me, Cole, you were talking about this with the offensive line. I think if you look at the wide receivers, if Matthew Middleton needs to go to a 4 or a 5, I don't think it would be Shane Porter or Jace Brown. I think he would go to Xavier Lloyd first. I think he would go to Jaden Jackson. But the starters were chalk there, and the starters, I think, is what we're going to see all season long. But I'm also a little concerned at what the backups are. Xavier Lloyd, I think, is primed for something just because we've been hearing about him for a year. So I think his place is real solid. But beyond that, it's just been, guys, it feels like they've just been throwing out different names every week. And again, on one hand, that's good. And on another hand, I don't know if that is good. So that goes back to me talking about tight ends. I think they maybe feel better about Garrett Oakley and Ben Sinnott than they do about what's going on at wide receiver right now. That, by all accounts, it's been this all fall camp, just highs and lows. One guy has a hit one practice, they have a miss the next practice. So figuring out as we go, I bet you if there's one position, guys, that does not look the same at the end of the year at the depth chart versus week one on offense, I think it'll be receiver.
Well, we mentioned Shane there, but Seth Porter is out, high ankle sprain. Duffy and Uso, we'll get to Uso in a second. He's not listed on the depth chart. They're all out for Saturday, so they're not on the depth chart. Shane's in there as a backup punter, but they're not going to use a punt returner, excuse me.
Right.
But none of them are expected to be that long term. In fact, Daniel Green was in the same boat. He's on this, so he must have had a good week. And it still wouldn't surprise me if maybe one of them plays, but we'll see how it goes with SEMO. They'd probably prefer to hold those guys out, but we're not sure. Basically, though, Cole, Keegan Johnson needs to be the guy. Right? I mean, we know what we're getting from the other receivers for the most part. RJ, we're hearing, is taking that next step, which is great timing on his part. And Phil is explosive, but sometimes has the dropsies. Keegan Johnson's got to be the guy, doesn't he?
He does. And I think that has been the plan all along. You go look at the specialist depth chart, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second, but he's listed as that second kick returner too. And so what they're banking on is Keegan Johnson replacing Malik Knowles. And I have said for a long time that I believe Keegan Johnson can be Malik Knowles and much more than Malik Knowles. And that's not a knock on Malik because he had a lot of big plays in his K-State career. But I think fans need to realize that Keegan Johnson and Malik Knowles are completely different players. Yes, they're asking Keegan Johnson to replace Malik Knowles' production and play the same position, but the type of receiver they are completely different. Keegan Johnson is a route runner. His routes are extremely crisp. He is a speedster. Malik Knowles was not a very good route runner. He didn't have the breakaway speed, but he would catch it if it was thrown to him. Keegan Johnson is a playmaker. He might not be as dependable as Malik as far as you throw it and have that big catch radius and he'll go get it. But he is a playmaker. And they are different receivers, but the skill set that that Keegan Johnson brings is different than Malik. But they are going to ask him to do pretty much the exact same thing, play that exact same position, and hope for more production.
I don't mean this as a shot in any way, but if he's more durable than Malik, he'll be more productive. I mean, Malik just has the injury bug, always has, and we saw it cost him at the Vikings camp. One more spot. We probably should have saved this for last, but it's very interesting. DJ Giddens, Trayshawn Ward, and the dreaded Orr in between them. And, of course, Anthony Frias, the second, is the other running back listed. Kleiman raved about him, said he's made great progress. But Ryan Wallace, when they step on the field for the first snap of the game, It's going to be DJ Giddens, isn't it? He's the guy that's been around.
I think it's Trayshawn Ward.
Wow.
I do. I mean, maybe in terms of who takes the field first, it will be DJ Giddens. But I watched Trayshawn Ward's highlights at Florida State, and I just go, I don't know how this isn't your lead tailback. And I've said all offseason, I still think we're going to see 2019 K-State where it's James Gilbert leading, but you had Jordan Brown, you had Harry Trotter. I mean, there were guys that were mixed in an awful lot. It'll be by committee. DJ's going to get a ton of reps. But I just think when push comes to shove, as far as who gets the most carries, who comes away with the most yardage, to me, Cole, it's got to be Trayshawn Ward. And I think it's got to be Trayshawn Ward if this team wants to have their highest potential of offensive success.
Yes, I believe it to be Trayshawn Ward. I think DJ Giddens is probably listed as the number one on the depth chart simply because you mentioned it, Fitz, but he's been here, and I think he's earned to at least see his name at the top, even if he doesn't actually start. But I think that Trayshawn Ward can do some things that replicate what Deuce Vaughn was able to do as far as catching the ball out of the backfield, being that shifty back, getting to the edge. And DJ Giddens is that power running back. But make no mistake about it, he possesses some game-changing speed. But yeah, Wally, I'm with you. I think Trayshawn Ward is going to be that lead guy, and he might actually get the first carry. Whatever the first play of the game last year, K-State ran that sweep and scored a touchdown. I had some people ask me, what do you think the first play is going to be? Well, I don't think it'll be a jet sweep, but it might be a counter or a sweep to Trayshawn Ward to see if they can bust off a big one.
I disagree with you too, but you're probably right. I think that would be just a note that DJ's put in the time. I think he might get the first carry, and then I agree with you that Trayshawn, if you had to break these down, 2/3 of the running back carries would go to him and 1/3 to DJ. Maybe Frias is in there for a short yardage. I don't know. Let's flip it over to the defense, guys. Defensive end, Khalid Duke. I was a little surprised by this, actually. They've been raving about Matlack. They have him and Duke at the same position. Brendan Mott is over there back as a starter. Cody Stufflebean, who they insist has made a great deal of progress. Also, I got to be honest here, guys. I thought we would see Duke and Matlack as the starters. And Mott's incredible. Don't get me wrong. He I think returns as top sack guy in the Big 12 that's returning. That's incredible. But we also have to recognize having Felix Inyedike Uzama at the other end makes everyone look a little better. We'll see. But this is clearly a three-man role. They're going to Matlack, I think, will play both sides. They'll just rotate these guys through quite a bit to keep them fresh. But on third and, passing situation, Khalid Duke's going to be out there. I mean, he's absolutely the guy that they're talking about from a rush-in standpoint has stepped into the Felix role. Wally, you surprised?
Yeah, I was actually, and for the exact reason you just said, just because it seems like all offseason we've heard about, guys, you didn't see Nate Matlack healthy. Guys, you haven't seen what Nate Matlack's been doing this offseason now that he's healthy. And he's listed as the number 2. Like you said, though, Fitz, splitting hairs, all three of them are going to play. Just like we saw when Nate was on the field at times last year with Felix, they were going, kind of almost like a 4-man rotation. There'll be 3 for sure. I'll be honest, I was maybe a little bit more surprised. And this was a position that, and again, this was maybe them going to the Bill Snyder route as in terms of veteran leadership and that sort of thing that, Cody Stufflebean has earned his stripes, but we've heard so much about Chidi Obiizawar that I thought for sure he was going to be on the 2s here. I still think he's going to get some run here in the non-con if they can get up on some guys. But pretty solid defensive end group that, again, Cole, they're going to play 3. Does it really matter who starts?
No, I don't think it does. And I honestly think it's as simple, guys, as 2 seniors are starting and the junior is listed second. Honestly, I think it's as simple as that. And, I tweeted this out earlier, but my goal for this week is to watch a K-State game every night before Saturday to kind of get a feel on some of these guys coming back. And I've been sitting here before we started recording, watching the Kansas game. And it struck me, first of all, thank you. I got a text message. Hopefully everybody heard that. I apologize about that. But it struck me how good Brendan Mott was, not just in that game, but all season long. And yes, a lot of that had to do with Felix, but a lot of that had to do with Brendan Mott just being better than his opponent. I mean, I don't think people realize how good of a season he had last year on his own. Yes, Felix demanded a lot of attention, but let's give credit to where credit is due. Mott had an outstanding season. And Khalid Duke, I mean, moving back down to defensive end was a blessing. There were times last year where it was hard to watch Khalid Duke play linebacker. He's learning a new position. Sometimes he's out of position. And now it's put your hand in the ground, go get the quarterback, make a play, do what you do best. And when I watch Khalid Duke play, it just reminds me of Justin Houston with the Chiefs in his prime. He has that build. He has that strength. That's exactly who he reminds me of when he rushes the passer. And I truly believe with those three defense ends, they're all going to play, and they're all going to be really good.
I agree. Nose tackle, of course, Uso is out. Not too severe of a, I think Coach Tui said that he got rolled up on. So we got Damian Ilalo. Man, I tripped over that. And Javon Banks as an or, which I don't think surprises either one. You know, that, yeah, I don't know who we're going to see. They want to see them in this game. I'm confident of that, to figure out who's their next guy. This game belongs to them. Since Uso's out, they're going to save him. I bet you he could play if they really needed him, but let's just see who wants to be the defensive tackle that backs up the big guy. And I have no idea who's going to win. None.
Yeah.
So let's move on to another position here. The linebackers. Des Purnell, who I've hired as my bodyguard last week when I saw him in person. Holy cow, is he much bigger. Daniel Green, there in middle spot, of course. And at that strong side linebacker, as my phone absolutely freaks out on me, who is it? No, at the weak side is Austin Moore, of course. No surprises. No, absolutely no surprises here. Wally, how good can this group be?
I think they can be really good, and as not just because of the ones, but the guys that are running number 2 at this group are ridiculous. They've loved Jake Clifton since the moment he came on.
Yep.
I think in a pinch he could play any of those 3 spots. I think the world of Tobi Osunsanmi from an athletic standpoint. It's just going to be about how quickly he can put it all together from the game plan standpoint. I think that's where Des Purnell right now has the advantage on him. But if we're just talking about who fits really what they want to do at that position from a size and athletic standpoint, it's Toby. And then the weak side linebacker, what a great guy for Asa Newsom to learn from with Austin Moore. Great guy to shadow. I think the one that it was not a surprise that he's not listed, but I will say, it might be an ode of what's to come, because I believe he still has a red shirt that's left to burn, and that's Terry Kirksey. Came over from Hutch, was a December signee, arrived in the winter and just hasn't been able to push forward. And I know he worked a little bit at Mike. I think he worked a little bit at Will. And so you see Asa has jumped him. You see Austin Romaine, who was there in the winter as well, jumped him or is ahead of him by all, intents and purposes right now, and even Bo Palmer. So he was maybe the one guy that I was curious to see if he would land on the depth chart as a 2 or 3. Did not, but man, this is a really strong group for this year and a really strong group moving forward.
I feel like it's entirely possible Jake Clifton is the backup at all 3 spots.
Yeah.
Like he can play all 3, but if they need to, they're going to put him out there. But to have 2 true freshmen on the depth chart, and they kind of went out of the way to list Austin Romaine. They listed 3 at that spot with no or, which
exactly
seemed odd. It's like they kind of wanted him out there and, put his name out there. This is an incredible group. I mean, Desmond Purnell blew us away with how good he became as the season went on. Let's be honest, they didn't want to play him. They had that's why they moved Khalid Duke to that spot. And he stepped up and just got better and better and better. And now with that added muscle, he could be really effective. Go ahead, bud.
No, sorry, Fitz. I just want to say that Asa Newsom is going to play. Like, this kid is legit. And ever since I watched him perform at K-State camp going into his junior season, I mean, this was evident that this is a kid who's going to play. And so that's what I'm going to say. Asa Newsom is going to play, and he's going to make an impact. He could play any of those spots, but between him and Jake Clifton and Toby Osunsami, K-State is in really good hands at the linebacker position for years to come. So go ahead.
It's absolutely incredible. It's incredible. Okay, let's move to the corner position. No real surprises here. Jacob Parrish at one side and Will Lee the third at the other side. And backing up here is Keenan Garber, who seems to be progressing, and Justice James. Wally, are you concerned about depth?
Yes. This is my number one focus right now heading into the season. It's corner. I mean, it's defensive back in general, but I almost think maybe corner, and we'll get to safety, and I can touch on that in a minute. But corner, Cole and I are big Jacob Parrish guys, huge right. Jacob Parrish guys. We've been waving that flag since, we saw him late June. Well, for me, it was late junior season, but certainly early in his senior year. Terrific talent, right? I mean, all the skills are there. If you ask me though, like, was I ready last year to see him on the field? No, that surprised me, and that was a good thing. He's good enough to get on the field, play him. Is it a good thing that Jacob Parrish is your number one cornerback as a sophomore that's played 10 games, but I mean meaningful minutes, snaps, and like maybe 3 or 4 games? That I don't know how to answer that. And then I think Will Lee can be a guy, but he needs time. I think there will be some hiccups there, like there was with Julius Brents right out of the gate, like there was with Danzel McDaniel right out of the gate. Guys that size that are adjusting to the college speed. I don't know if it'll be just instant impact, but I'm really nervous about the twos there. Keenan Garber is a terrific athlete. His speed's off the charts. Great ball skills and stuff, but you're moving him over, and I know he did great like on a week's work of last year going into the Big 12 championship game. But I think asking him to do it on a week-to-week basis, on one hand, he should improve over that time, but I don't feel great about him being like essentially your number 3 or 4 guy. And then you've got Justice James, who's already a backup, and he's coming off a season-ending knee injury last year. So to me, that doesn't – you talk about kind of whether it bodes well or bad for the position group. To me, that doesn't bode great for the cornerbacks.
I just think it's interesting that 2 true freshmen in the secondary played extensive minutes against Alabama. A couple 3-star kids coming to K-State, end up in the Sugar Bowl playing Alabama and held their own. And that gets us to the safety spots as we pop that back open. Of course, Kobe Savage is back at strong. The jack is B.J. Payne, the sophomore who's back. And Marcus Siegel is the free safety. So if it's injury attorneys, it's Savage, Payne, and Siegel. Except these injury attorneys actually inflict the injuries. I'm really hopeful for this group. I'm having Kobe Savage back. That was a dreadful injury for K-State's defense. I thought they did a great job plugging the gaps without him, but I thought he came in and established himself as a mainstay in that defense basically from the first snap. He was at home. He's running around. So hopefully he's healthy, but I think BJ Payne he just blew me away last year. I mean, the way he grew into his increased role was impressive. I think they're in good shape again, but Wally, the depth.
Yeah, they need Siegel to be the real deal.
Right.
I mean, I think I've got a lot of confidence in BJ Payne to be a dude. I think Kobe Savage, even let's say he's not right back to 100%. Maybe there's some rust he still needs to knock off in a under the lights type situation. He's still just so savvy, right? I mean, he just knows the game so well that I don't think we're going to see him like drastically out of position or stuff like that. So I have confidence in Savage. Siegel, they need to be the real deal, and I think that's why you've got Jordan Wright kind of behind him as a what do you call it, a safety blanket of sorts. But what kind of safety blanket is it when the guy was playing corner up until like a couple weeks ago? Obviously, he covers really well, but learning the new position, I don't know. Cole, this is one of those positions that the starting lineup I feel okay about, right? Like I think that they're good enough. The backups are questionable, but at the same time, Cole, I feel like, I'm curious if you're with me on this. I think they've got some other guys that might even be deeper on the chart, or they're off the chart, that could end up being fine replacements as twos, but maybe they're just not ready for week one.
No, that's exactly right. The guy that jumps out to me is Kanajil Thomas, true freshman cornerback. Had a chance to watch him play in high school. You mentioned Justice James when going back to the cornerback position. For folks who might not be familiar, Justice James, formerly known as Justice Clemens. So if you are having trouble recalling the last name, there was a name change in the offseason. But I look at this safety group, and I specifically talked to Monty Spiller about this on our Friday walkthrough, which if you haven't checked that out, go check that out. We did a season preview where we talked about the safeties, and he said half the battle is lining up. If you have guys that know where to line up and know where to be in position, then you're going to be fine. And so I think people might pause when they see a Trey Krause, a walk-on from Olathe West, a Jack Fabris, another true freshman come in, a legacy player. There might be some pause, but I think half the battle for those guys is knowing where to line up. You mentioned Jordan Wright, and we go back to the corner. I think the safety corner depth can be solved with a guy like Jordan Wright. He can play corner and he can play safety. So if they need 3 cornerbacks into the game, I think Jordan Wright is going into the game. And so I think there's guys that can be juggled around at that position. But yeah, I think there is some depth there at that safety position that's not on the 2 deep. And guys, this shouldn't surprise you with Joe Kleinerman. This is typical Joe Kleinerman. I'm going to play the guys. I'm going to list the guys who work the hardest. Those guys are going to get their shot, and then we'll figure out the rest after that.
But guys, this was the one to me that was the most surprising. This position group. I thought we might see Max Marsh out there as a 2 or 3. Didn't see him. Nikendre Steiger played in week 1 last year after coming on the team for 3 weeks. I think he's coming back from an injury, but I thought maybe he'd find his way on here. Wesley Fair, Cam Salas. There are a bunch of guys that I thought might have a shot at least being a 3 that aren't here. And I think Cole's right, Fitz. I think people that are wondering, Fabris, Krause, they're heady. I think they know the playbook right now, and that's in week 1. That's what coaches want to see.
If Fabris is like his dad, he's not only intelligent, he's crazy. He's nuts. John Fabris was just unbelievable. Before we move on to special teams, a few reminders here. As Cole mentioned, we've got the Friday walkthrough that is up and live. It is already our largest episode, most viewed episode of the walkthrough as they start season 2. And it kind of kicks off some original programming we're going to do. We're going to move the game preview, the PowerCat pregame podcast, it'll still be a podcast, but it'll move here to YouTube also. So that will be part of our programming. And we're reviving the Insiders, something that we kind of moved away from for a while. And Cole will be doing the post-game podcast with me now, simply because it's real handy. I don't have to call Brian Hanley. Cole will be with me. He'll be like my little buddy everywhere I go. So I'll have Cole with me. And the Insiders will feature Brian Hanley, our football analyst, who will also be on the pregame podcast, Tim Everson of the Manhattan Mercury, the sports editor, and Glenn Kinley from Channel 27 in Topeka. That's our core cast. We've got some backups because, taping every Monday at whatever, some people are going to have conflicts. Even Kinley, because he's going to cover KU media time, and I just like, Glenn, really? You're going to cheat on your alma mater with KU, but he's a pro. He's going to do it. So we've got a great set of backups. Even Scott McFarland from the Bosco Boys is going to be one of our backups. He has a big boy job, so he's going to steal time. He couldn't do it on a weekly basis. And Joe Tillery from Heartland will back up, and so will the guys on your screen as we move through the Insiders. And hopefully we can use some other people than just our staff, but I'm really excited about that. So those are the 3 original programs, and nothing's going away. I mean, the daily deliveries, the walk and talks, and I'll even throw in some Deep Purples, which I'm overdue to do another one. We did this instead, and on with the special teams. And here we go. Chris Tennant listed as the field goal kicker. There was rumors that he kind of wanted to get into the kickoffs. He's going to do that also. And the holder is Jack Bloomer. The punter is Jack Bloomer. And, let's get down here to the snapper, Rand Plattner, everyone's favorite tuba player. Is it tuba that he stole? And then kickoff returns. Phil Brooks and Keegan Johnson will be back there. Phillip Brooks is the punt returner, of course. Will Phil Brooks be the main guy? It looks like he's going to be the main guy on kickoff returns, or is it Keegan? Don't know. Don't care.
Keegan.
Go ahead, Wally.
Keegan.
That would be my guess.
Yes.
Keegan.
Yeah. I think Phillip Brooks is too valuable as that second returner, as the blocker, as the lead blocker to be the number one returner. And quite frankly, you want somebody back there on a kickoff return who has the speed to get to the outside, to get up through the middle. And I think Keegan Johnson's speed is his greatest asset. So give me Keegan Johnson to be the lead returner and Phil to keep that role as the second guy. That'd be my guess.
Well, no matter who coaches this team, the ability to find returners and put them into a good position, but also to trust the other 10 guys. The returns going here, run like hell. Something will be there, and if not, you'll get tackled. But it's just, will that be an adjustment for Keegan Johnson to just have that trust that these guys are going to pop open holes? Because we don't have a depth chart on this, but those other 10 guys, there's going to be a lot of newbies out there. There's going to be a lot of new faces on this unit, creating the blocks. It might be a process. We've got a new special team coordinator, if you want to call it that. So I don't know what we're going to see from this, but I'm all in on Keegan Johnson. If they get him hurt right away, I won't be in on that plan, but I'm excited. This is a K-State tradition. Will he be able to hold it up?
I think he will, and even if he can't, I think that this was a position that they've got a lot of candidates and a lot of worthy options. It was just a matter of seeing who was going to win the battle. But I mean, you go back to recruiting tape. RJ Garcia has done stuff at kick and punt return. Trayshawn Ward did some kickoffs at Florida State Limited. Sterling Lockett, I remember watching him handle some things. He doesn't have Tyler Lockett's speed, but guys that are familiar as a special teams returner, they've got lots of candidates there. Keenan Garber would be another one that comes to mind. Jacob Parrish did some stuff in high school. So no shortage of options there, Fitz. But yeah, I mean, you want Keegan to be good. And I think he will be, for what Cole said. I think you've got an up man like Phillip Brooks that Kleiman praised it just a couple weeks ago. He's going to be back there, but man, it'd be nice to keep him as the up man because he's so good. And then punt returner, Phillip's just so good. I'm curious to see if they'll give anybody a little bit more run at punt returner, if they can get up. Because I went back trying to as we were doing our depth chart projections, to see, is there anybody else that's really fielded punts and blowout games from last year? It was always Phillip. Maybe Seth Porter did a little bit.
Seth did a few times.
He might have done once or twice, but yeah, I mean, at some point you would think maybe they would want to get somebody out there just to do one in-game punt, just to feel what it's like for next season. But I think special teams will be fine. And Fitz, I will say this to jump on what you said. You mentioned a lot of newbies on special teams. I think we might even see some freshmen there too. Because from what I was hearing in the offseason, there were a lot of freshmen that did not appear on the depth chart for week one that will be in line for heavy special duties roles on coverage and blocking for return units.
Well, I will be interested to see who they put out there. If they decide to go to someone as a backup, I guess Seth Porter is probably listed because in an emergency, he'll go fair catch. I don't see him actually returning any balls. But guys, you both missed the guy that jumped out of camp with his ability to field punts. Cole, will Chris Kleiman see any action as the punt returner? Because that was solid. Now, granted, Bloomer put the ball right down the middle of the field. He didn't make his coach run, but he tracked that sucker. I'm all in on it.
Well, just like Monty Spiller said in the walkthrough, defensive backs can return kicks and can return punts. I think Chris Kleiman would agree with that statement.
Yeah. And I do love that on kickoffs. I like a DJ Reed back there because, you play a defensive player and he doesn't have to transition immediately to go play. He jogs off the field and your receivers or whoever would be your kick returner come jogging onto the field. So maybe that will emerge. Guys, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I'll offer something here because it slid into my DMs today with some exclusive info here on the StreamYard. By all accounts, from somebody that would know, Chris Tennant won this damn kicking job, this place kicking job. I think it was tight early on in fall camp, and Chris has apparently, again, for those that were at practices, right, wasn't us, he really ran away with it. I think Leighton Simmering, what was it, like a week or two ago that Chris Kleiman said it was still like, I'd have to check with Coach Chili Davis and see some uncertainty. It just sounds like something clicked with Chris Tennant. I'm really interested to see if that holds true because, guys, the tools are all there. I mean, his leg from the time when he was at Mill Valley is, a real weapon. And he's tremendous at kickoffs for that reason. It's always just kind of been about, what's right here and putting it between the goalposts. And again, by someone that would know, it sounds like the light bulb really went on and he dominated the end of fall camp. So hopefully, that's the case because it'd be nice to have some stability at that position heading into the season.
Yeah.
He just had the yips last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like a golfer that couldn't hit the short putts. It's just, again, we watched him in the warm-ups at TCU, the game in which he really kind of, the yips started, and he was absolutely drilling field goals in warm-ups, and he got into the game, and he started trying to steer the ball instead of drive the ball, and he just fell apart. And so hopefully they got that solved.
Yeah, Fitz, I remember specifically in that game sitting up there with you and hitting you on the shoulder. You might have been watching another game. He just kicked a 65-yard field goal in warmups. Like there was a lot of wind there, but he kicked it. He made multiple. So yeah, Chris Tennant, I think it's going to be his job until it's not, and that might be soon. That might be week 4. That might be, who knows? Maybe it doesn't happen at all. But I think it's Chris Tennant's job to lose. And also, we have to talk about the long snapper. I cannot go on a show and not talk about how good our Kansas State long snapper is. Long snappers are people to Brandon Plattner, best long snapper in the nation. He's the best tuba player in the nation. And seriously, when a long snapper screws up, it's big news. Knock on wood for Kansas State. That hasn't happened, and I don't see it happening.
I don't agree with you that long snappers are people too. They see the world upside down. They view the world from between their legs, which is odd. And I've known a lot of long snappers, and they're all just a little bit wired wrong. I think from getting hit in the head too often. I've known a lot of long snappers that just they don't work right, but they're great at long snapping.
You can't hit him anymore. You can't hit him anymore. You do it.
Hey, I passed Corey Adams at the Target the other day in Overland Park.
Really?
And I said, Corey Adams, legendary K-State long snapper, folks, from the Big 12 championship days. But of course, I was attending to a meltdown in the back of my van from my daughter. So I thought it might be weird if I poked my head out of the van and screamed Corey Adams. But yeah, long snapper stories, guys.
I know they're the best. Just a little piece of advice to anyone who has a long snapper, knows a long snapper, encounters a long snapper in Aggieville: don't drink with them. Don't do it. No, unless you got someone to bail you out, don't do it.
This sounds like a topic for the case or for the GoPowercat podcast.
No doubt. No doubt. Remember, folks, we'll have your pregame podcast on YouTube and on our podcast platforms. That'll hit Thursday morning. You're going to get it. Friday, we'll have the walkthrough bright and early. They'll be on both YouTube and your other podcast platforms. Then we'll come back with the first episode of The Insiders. It's kind of a post-game thing we'll do every Monday after a game. I'll probably do one during the open week too. I hope you enjoy the programming. I hope you enjoyed this live. And I'm ready for Saturday. Boys, I'm ready for Saturday. And I'm the guy who literally doesn't want football until I have to face the truth. I want more summer. I think last week being 179 degrees all week and having actual tangible football on my TV Saturday, I'm ready.
Bring it
you
on.
Boys just get in. You just get into that press box early because it sounds like it's going to be another heater.
Yep.
Yeah, but we'll overcome in the press box.
I'm sure you will.
We'll make it work with ice cream sandwiches. Yep. That's it for this live. We appreciate everyone watching and continue to subscribe and watch our YouTube channel as we bring you more and more K-State coverage right here on YouTube and GoPowercat.com.